Okay, lesson 1.4 is properties and just being able to use the properties. These are all properties you guys have seen a lot over the years. And I say that because I remember my kids, like my personal kids, seeing them in elementary. And I remember thinking, wow, you guys learned these as far back as elementary. Now, do you remember them? That's not what I'm saying at all. Okay? But I just want to talk about them. And the idea of the commutative property. There's commutative of addition or multiplication. But the idea is if I say 2 plus 3, is that any different from saying 3 plus 2? No. And if I say 4 times 5, is that any different from saying 5 times 4? So the commutative property just says it doesn't matter which order I multiply or add in. That's all it says. Okay? The associative property is kind of the same thing, kind of talking about how the order doesn't matter. It uses parentheses. And what happens with the associative property is the parentheses move. So notice on both sides, 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6, or 2, 4, 5, 2, 4, 5. But what changes? The parentheses change. Here they're around 5 and 6. To over here they're around 4 and 5. So it just changes the order that we do things. And so this is saying, okay, if I add 5 and 6 first here and get 11, and then I add 4, that's 15. Just as over here, if I add 4 and 5 first and get 9, and then add 6, that's 15. So the associative property, you keep the numbers in the same order, but the parentheses move, telling you what you're adding or multiplying first. So that's your associative property. The identity property, how do you get the same number? So what do I add to 5 to stay at 5? And so the adding identity is 0. Because if I add 0 to something, I stay at the same number. Multiplication identity, what do I multiply something by to stay at the same number? And that is 1. So if you see something adding 0 and staying the same, that's your adding identity. If you see something multiplying by 1 and staying the same, that's your multiplication identity. Okay. This one's pretty easy too. 0 property of multiplication. What happens when you multiply by 0?
0.
8 times 0 is 0. So that's just talking about when you multiply by 0, you get 0. And multiplication property of -1. What happens when you multiply something by -1?
It's going to stay negative.
Yeah, the number stays the same, but it turns negative or it changes the sign. Because if it's already negative, a negative times a negative would make it a positive. Okay, so I don't remember exactly how the homework works. I forgot to look, but these examples right here, what property is this an example of? So like using these up here, x plus 12 equals 12 plus x. Which property is that an example of? That if it's x plus 12 here, I can flip it over here and it's 12 plus x. It's commutative property. If you want to get technical, commutative property of addition or multiplication. Addition because we're adding, right?
Yeah.
So yes, this is the commutative property. And they might have you say of addition. I can't remember. Actually, it's probably multiple choice is what it is. Okay, so that's the commutative property of addition. Okay. Next one. 3 times 10 times 12 in parentheses is equal to 3 times 10 in parentheses times 12.
Isn't that competitive? Isn't that the first one?
So if it's, let's see, which one, and I can't say which one has parentheses because it won't always work out that way, but what did I say about associative? The numbers do what? They stay in the same order, but the parentheses move. Is that what's happening? 3, 10, 12?
Yeah.
3, 10, 12? The parentheses move from being around one set of them to the other set. And so, yes, this is the associative property. Officially, I should say the associative property of multiplication. Okay. I'm going to take Chloe out of this one.
Oh, that's nice.
47 times 0 equals 0.
So it's the same thing. Both unify,
What are we doing here? We are multiplying by
0.
0. Which one talks about multiplying by 0?
Addition. No. 0 property multiplication.
Yeah. There's zeros two places here. The identity property of addition, but are we adding 0 here? No. There's also the 0 property of multiplication, and that's what we're talking about here.
I didn't realize those were down there, like the two bottom ones.
Oh, did you overlook those?
Yeah, because I thought they were just like down.
Nope, those are choices too,
So
but at least you know why. So yeah, we've got really 5 choices, and 3 of those choices, though, you then have to say addition or multiplication. But yeah, identity, if we see a plus 0 or a times 1, I could go for identity. But if it's times 0, that's 0 property of multiplication. And if it's multiplying by -1, that's multiplication property of -1. Okay. 14 plus 0 equals 14.
it's addition. No, it's how do you say that second dot?
Associative?
Am I still banned?
But if it's good question. Hold that thought for a moment, okay? If it's associative, we've got to have at least 3 numbers.
Wait, are you talking about the 14?
Do I have 3 numbers happening here?
Nope. So it's multiple. No, it's not. It's multiplication.
Don't overthink this. What do we see here? We see a
0.
0, specifically a
Addition.
plus 0. Where do we see a plus 0 here?
The indify whatever that word is.
Identity?
Yeah.
Identity property of which?
Addition.
Addition, right? Okay. This is our identity property of addition, because that says when you add 0 to something, guess what? It stays the same. Okay. I'm going to give this next one to Jacob. 12 times -1 equals -12.
Multiplication from the
Does that make sense? Multiplication property of -1. We're multiplying by -1. Multiplication property of -1 is doing just that. So multiplication property of -1. And I am not writing very neat. I just realized. Sorry about that. You can read it though, yes?
Yeah.
It's just not very neat.
You can write better than some other teachers.
Mr. Weaver is a little sometimes.
Yeah.
He writes too fast.
Okay, last one. And I'll open this up. It's for everybody. 24 times 1 equals 24.
Identity of multiplication.
I
said it like 3 times.
Okay, so where can we multiply by 1 and it stays the same?
Yep.
That's the identity, right? When you can do something to it, it stays the same. That's identity. Since we're multiplying, it's the identity property of multiplication. A little familiar with those properties now?
Sort of. Yeah.
Okay.
That's borderline, but for some other very reason. Easy.
What makes it really hard is if I take the list of properties out from in front of you and you have to identify them. That's when it makes it really hard, but it's
I think
doable.
it'd just be like memorization.
It is to an extent. So, okay, let's look at the bottom three examples. These are it just says simplify. And so it's really, officially, it's using those properties up above is what it's using. I'm not going to go with that official, though, because we use these properties without knowing, without realizing. You use the commutative property, the associative property all the time. You just don't think about it. So thoughts on 6 plus, and then parentheses, 4h plus 3.
So don't you do 4h plus 3?
Okay, so officially we are supposed to add 4h and 3 first. Can I add 4h plus 3?
Yes. No, you cannot. I don't know.
Well, which is it? Okay, good answer. I don't know then.
Okay.
Okay, and in order to add and subtract in algebra, they have to be like terms. Are 4h and 3 like terms?
Nope.
No, so I can't add those. So I'm going to rewrite this, but I'm just going to drop off the parentheses. So if I say that this is 6 plus 4h plus 3. We tried to add the parentheses, but that wasn't an option. Is there anything I can add?
The 6 and the 3.
Yeah, aren't 6 and 3 just regular numbers? Yeah. So, what is 6 plus 3?
9.
9. And then what else needs to be carried down?
The H.
Plus 4h. Now, I like to ask this trick question. What is 9 plus 4h?
9 4h.
9 plus 4.
About 9 plus 4h?
Well,
Okay, you have to say the plus in there. But in other words, can I add those?
yeah.
We can't add them because this one has an h
Man.
and this one doesn't. So you can say 9 plus 4h. You can say 4h plus 9, but we can't add them. Now, what about multiplying?
In that case, so you have to do 3x times 5.
Well, technically, if we're going by the parentheses, I agree you can do that. Technically, if going by parentheses, we need to do
X times 5.
x times 5. And what is x times 5?
X5.
What if you
5x.
You could say x5. However, the preference is going to be 5x. And what is 3 times 5x?
15x.
15x. So the difference between those two, to add, they have to be like terms. To add and subtract. To multiply, you can multiply anything you want.
Oh, this next one,
Okay, one more.
can we quiet on this one? I don't want to talk about it.
40xy divided by x.
You just have to do. Okay, so you're going to do egg. You're going to do 40 divided by x, right?
Does it just stay the same?
Yeah, does it say the same? Did you do 40x?
There is one thing you can do.
Oh, 40x divided by xy.
Okay, first of all, what are we dividing here? What does it say we're dividing?
40.
You're changing the problem. You can't change the problem.
X
It is 40xy
divided.
divided by x. So we can't change the problem any other way. It's taking that whole 40xy and dividing by x. Is there anything in common that could cancel out?
The X.
The x.
The x can cancel out. And so what we can do is that x can just cancel out.
So it would be
Maybe 40y.
And when the x cancels out, we're left with 40y. Okay? Let's technically review, but it's also checking those skills. To remember those skills, to remember what can and can't add, what can and can't multiply, what can divide, those type of things. So your homework is lesson 1.4 in Math Excel. It may not quite be open yet. I may have to push it open.